Sun's up. Here we go again. I would have made this video earlier and the sun hadn't yet come up, but I found myself quite busy working on a letter to a friend, and I'd been meaning to write this letter for some time, so I spent a solid hour to 2 hours reading, rereading, proofreading, and then eventually just settling. The letter went beyond the scope of its original intention, which is generally what happens if I write letters, because my thoughts are tangential, and if I'm not done writing, I'm not done writing. And so, yeah, that's a consequence of free thought, is sometimes you just keep going. And by the end, you have to hope that with everything you said, they focus on the right things. Because if you're trying to express a point to somebody, brevity is pretty important. People like slogans, people like short forms. People remember what they want to remember. People have a tendency to project meaning onto conversations that they have, which is, it's only human nature. We hear words. The words aren't the words, but they are symbolic of something deeper, something more real than the word itself. And it's up to the listener to decide what that thing is. And hopefully they could find something that's true in the words. But sometimes interpretations are false. And if someone isn't aligned properly with the laws of life, generally their sense of what's right and wrong, what's true, what's trying to be portrayed, is going to be skewed. Trying to see the truth in this world is hard enough. Understand also that once you think you see it, you have to figure out if that's even really the truth, or if what you're seeing is illusory. It's pretty damn easy to claim that you've seen the truth. The fact is, a lot of people never will. It's difficult for me to accept that I have friends in my life that may never, and never is a pretty intense word, so I like to think that I can try to continue to talk to these people over the course of my life and help us both to see from each other's perspective. I don't necessarily think my perspective is true yet. If it ever will be, it'll be by God. I think, why even bother being true? There's so many reasons to think about why to be true. Like, the number one reason for me is to avoid pain, because the truth comes out. If you've ever tried to lie or deceive anyone about anything, the guilt is simply too much for somebody who's trying to be in touch with the soul. Whatever veils become between people who refuse to attempt to be in touch with the soul, whatever veils may come, they may not ever truly see the soul. And if you're not looking, then how could you see it? If you're not listening, how could you hear it? We've been given eyes to see and ears to hear. I walk around a lot in nature, and I run into old guys, elders. I always have respected my elders. I always stop and talk to them. And what one man said to me recently is, "You'd be amazed the amount of stuff you see and hear once you just slow down. It's true. As somebody that exercised, went for runs, the purpose was the goal. And to extinguish goal-oriented thinking while still carrying out the plan, it's not to say that the goal doesn't exist, but to always hold it in one's mind as though it should take precedence over the present moment. Goal-oriented thinking is a trap, and it keeps you from being who you are, from seeing things how they are, seeing the world as it is. You're thinking about what next? What next? Well, how about what now? Seriously. And what have consequences in this world for a violation of not understanding what's now, not knowing how to act, how to adapt in this moment as compared to whatever false conception of a goal or a moment you have. You notice that make a plan and God laughs. There are always going to be unexpected trials, things popping up in your life. And once you solve a fundamental problem in your life, generally it is the case that another one will make itself known, because it is simply not in the nature of the human being to just be at peace with oneself. There's something of the body which keeps us moving, keeps us running, and it's up to a higher power, whether inside and connected to something greater, to tell the body when to relax and to reassure the body that it can relax and be okay with it. We live in a world where a lot of our needs are met, and our body's not ready to accept that we might be okay. We may confuse our suffering with that of a need like hunger or thirst. But we're pretty well advanced past these. I think most of our trouble isn't of the body anymore. Most of our trouble is of the spirit, of the mind. I like to think that we are all reflections, in a way, of God, of the planet, of our lands, of what we eat. All of these things are connected, and not only connected, but they reflect each other, as though you can see the smallest aspect of God in something like a leaf or a plant, but you can still see the same aspect in something as large as a storm, take like a photo of a hurricane taken from above. Like all of these things are the same. Like they come from the same source, and you can see it if you really look. Like they call it, you can find golden spiral in nature. That's some keywords. You try to look for that, and you'll see reflections of the same basic shapes and angles. Just, I think we are all reflections, and it's interesting to think. It's like, I don't know if it's true, but I hear as you dig into the earth, the temperature gets hotter by 1 degree Fahrenheit for something like every 50 feet or something like that. I don't know how deep we've really gone, but if you follow logic, the inside of the earth should be pretty fucking hot, like hot as hell even. I don't know what I'm trying to say exactly. But if we're reflections of the earth, to think that we have this hard exterior crust, but inside we're full of molten rock, it's a lot to fathom. We think about the symbols of stone, symbol of fire. We're gonna go to 15 minutes. Fire is very passionate. Earth is very grounding, and it's almost, I think about molten rock inside of human beings as symbolic of some sort of natural passion or destiny. How are we supposed to know ourselves inside out physically? It's not meant to be, really. We must understand ourselves physically and mentally and spiritually. All aspects of self must be understood. If we are reflections of a greater picture, we must understand too the aspects of the greater picture so that we can then apply them to ourselves. This is the crux of animal psychology. We see chimpanzees with factions that go to war with each other with strict hierarchies. Mankind has the potential to deny his nature. I believe that we've been given free will in this life. But when we look at animals, we can tell that they are simply walking in union with the spirit. It's very difficult for an animal to become corrupt by itself. I think that it requires an owner to corrupt it, or an enslaver. Like, truly, animal captivity is can go one of two ways. I like to think of like a wild I'm going to try to stay within the terms of service here, but in the days of slavery, there were slaves that stayed in the house and slaves that worked outside. And I often think about, like, the dogs that are owned by people and kept in cages and inside. They're very pampered, and I assume that the pets that, you know, are outside are the ones that never evolved to be pets, like real wolves and things like that. They can look at these animals of the same species, and they don't see the same thing at all. I think that is to say that something which is brought into the house is removed from its nature. Something which is brought away from actual nature. Well, I mean, after a generation or two, and we can see it with our own people, we no longer know how to simply live. And what is it to simply live but to stay warm, to eat, to drink? Most of us would die out here, which is the truth. There's very little meat to be had. Our water is poisoned. It's just the way it is. We have a lot of people here, and a lot of farms, and a lot of runoff. And so sometimes the small towns, we take the shit from the bigger towns, and it just so happens that you can no longer really just drink water or hunt here without fear of some, you know, sickness of humanity finding its way into your body via what we think is nature. It's further away is where real nature is, and it's one step at a time that we must approach the journey back to nature. This is better than the city, the big city. I mean, this is really just a lake at the end of town, but I find peace here. I find clarity of thought. Most people say hi as you walk by. It's pretty jarring for people who live in the city. But closer. Always closer. On a journey, but you must be okay simply with being on. The destination is destiny. I find that interesting. Destiny, destination. Keep working away at it. Ask yourself, who are you going to be today? Every day counts. That's everything.